Hi, folks. Okay, so for the next talk, we have Seán and Annie from Analytics Engines, and we're talking about the accessibility revolution. Take it away, folks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oduntan, and I'm here with Seán Halvey. I'm a data scientist at Analytics Engines, and Seán is a senior data scientist at Analytics Engines as well. We're really happy to be here to speak to you guys about the accessibility revolution and how AI is rewriting digital inclusion. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the summary of what we're talking about today, but it's essentially based on an AI-powered all-text agent that we built internally. So just to give a brief rundown of how this would go, I will talk about why all-text matters, go into brief detail about our solution and our foundation, which is context, before handing it over to Seán to discuss more technical side of things and talk about how we dealt with documents, how this works in a production environment, and show you guys some interesting results. I thought it'd be good to start this off with like a question, rhetorical of course, but when was the last time you thought about alt text? And as follow-up questions to that, how do you think people that rely on screen readers experience images without descriptions? Who do you think gets left behind when we skip the process of alt text? And what information do you think becomes invisible without alt text? And that leads to the reasonable conclusion that alt text is not just a technical checkbox, but it's mainly about equal access to information. And why does it matter? There are two critical reasons why this matters now. Alt text is something that's very important, but it's widely overlooked. And there are two major reasons why this has to change, one of which is the accessibility gap. And with the shift towards more digital-based content with ebooks and PDFs, there's a risk of leaving millions of readers behind just because of that fundamental shift. There's also the legal angle to it, which is the European Accessibility Act that makes accessibility something that's mandatory and not an option. And I will explore both of these. Starting with the digital reading accessibility gap. Many PDFs and ebooks lack proper alt-text descriptions for images and diagrams in their documents. And this makes critical visual information inaccessible to people that use screen readers. I thought it'd be good to give an example. So I want you to think about how you would experience this book. This book is about the first car ever made. And beside the first paragraph, we have an image of the supposed first car. So in 1885, Carl Benz created the motor wagon, the first true automobile. And this vehicle revolutionized transportation and launched the modern automotive era. And if you think about how this feels, it feels incomplete. It feels almost empty without the alt text. But if you have the alt text added, if you're listening to it, you would have the extra paragraph of the Benz patent motor wagon, a three-wheeled vehicle with large spoked wheels, an open wooden bench seat, and a visible single-cylinder, well, this is a mouthful, sorry. A visible single-cylinder engine mounted at the rear. And that feels more complete, and I feel like I've gotten way more information about the first car ever built rather than relying on the first single paragraph. And that's how people who rely on screen readers experience documents that don't have alt text added to them. Another thing that we thought about is how manual alt text creation is very time-consuming and extremely expensive, and it often leads publishers to skip the step entirely. And some documents require some level of subject matter expertise for alt text creation. So imagine if you're a university student learning about physics. I don't think you would want any alt text added to your physics documents or a math book, or even a better example, we have a biology textbook with plants diagrams like this. So an alt text, an inadequate one, would be something like a flower diagram. But with some subject matter expertise, if you have some subject matter expertise in botanics or biology at large, you would have a cross-sectional diagram of a flower showing large yellow petals surrounded by a central green pistil and reproductive structures. I'm sorry, this is a mouthful. But the challenge this poses is that imagine a single biology textbook containing 50 to 100 botanical diagrams like this. And if you're a subject matter expert, you would need at least like 2 to 3 minutes of careful analysis to be able to come up with alt text which is suitable enough for this diagram. And that's 2 hours of specialized work per textbook. And we're not talking about the backlog of biology textbook that may exist. And this is just not scalable, you know, if we think about the future. And the impacts that this has is that readers with visual impairments struggle to access digital content. Screen readers miss crucial information in documents. And again, the growing shift to digital materials risk leaving visually impaired readers behind. And the other angle, which is the legal angle to all this, is the European Accessibility Act, which kind of came into being in 2019, but had an implementation deadline of earlier this year in June. And this makes alt text something accessibility mandatory and not an option. It requires that all digital content meets comprehensive accessibility standards. Just to see what that looks like at a glance, some of the requirements are that all text is provided for non-decorative images. So images not like this that is just providing decoration, but images that, you know, add crucial information to the document. Another requirement is that all text is exposed to assistive technologies. So think of screen readers like Orca and JAWS and NVIDIA. The screen readers need to be able to access the alt text in the documents. Information also needs to be presented in a way that people reading the documents or listening to the documents would understand. And alt text, the most important, which I think is the basis of our solution, is that alt text considers the image's context within the content. So it can't be inadequate like the flower diagram that I showed you before. It actually needs to take into account the context of the document. And that's where our solution comes in. So we automate the generation of descriptive alt text using a large language model, and specifically GPT-4o. And we make it scalable and cost-effective to add quality alt text to books. And our foundation is using the context from the documents, we create meaningful and accurate descriptions. So many people benefit from our alt text solution. People with visual impairments, students with disabilities, people who just listen to audiobooks, researchers and scholars, and some elderly readers who may have age-related vision decline. We built our system based on context from surrounding text of the documents. So our system understands not just what the image shows, but why it matters in the specific document. So if we're looking at graphs in a math textbook, we don't just explain what we see in the graph, but we take account of the document in its entirety. And why context matters. All text should convey the purpose of an image. For example, if we're looking at a book or listening to a book about how to use the internet, and we have a picture of the magnifying glass icon, a proper alt text would be a magnifying glass icon representing the search function rather than something like a magnifying glass. And our initial testing with contextually aware alt text generation performed so well that it gave us the confidence to build this into a full-fledged product, which is where Seán comes in. And the results showed that context was essential for creating truly useful alt text at scale. This kind of came about in January. We met one of our clients who's in publishing, and we kind of identified the opportunity. I did some research and analysis to see what existing alt text generators exist in the market, and do they take context into account. And I think that's where our selling point comes in with the context, because most alt text generators would allow you to upload single images, not the entire documents, and they're not able to embed these alt text into the document structure. And I kind of developed a POC in March, April time, which Seán kind of, took it out into a more real-world implementation between June and September. I think this is a good time to hand over to Seán to go into more technical details about our alt text solution.
Yep, thanks, Annie. So as Annie kind of said, this process has been going on for a wee bit of time now since we kind of identified the first opportunity, and we built out that POC and kind of saw this was something that would be useful and solved a problem. So I'm going to kind of focus on that end point now, which is kind of putting this into production. And I think, as everyone knows, AI is everywhere at the moment. It's doing a lot of different things. So I think if you came to this talk wondering, like, how do you actually go through that process of building something with AI at its core, this should be for you, and that's what I'm going to focus on in the next one. So first of all, I'll give you a bit of a high-level overview of what we actually built. So deployed in Azure, uses ChatGPT 4.0 in the background, Python backend, and essentially what this does, our alt text solution allows users to upload a document which doesn't meet accessibility guidelines, doesn't have alt text within the images. It takes that document, parses out text and images, sends them to the model that we use, which generates the alt text then using the images and, as Annie says, the context. It then sends that back to the front end and to the databases and allows users to download a document with that alt text now in it that meets the accessibility guidelines. And thankfully, a lot of this went really well, our whole process, like developing this. So I'm not going to go through every nitty-gritty detail, but I'm going to focus on some of the places where we had challenges maybe that we had to overcome. And hopefully that kind of, maybe somebody on a similar challenge will be able to figure out a solution, or it'll inspire you that these sort of challenges can be overcome and you should still go ahead and build what you want to build. A couple of people may note that I said we're using ChatGPT 4.0, and some people will say, like, why aren't you using one of the newer models, one of the reasoning models? The answer to that's very simple. Whenever we did our initial POC analysis, we tried out a couple and it gave us the results we needed. And I think that's probably a good first lesson to take from this talk is don't let yourselves fall into the hype sometimes. Sometimes the older models can be very good. They can do what you need. And obviously if an older model can do what you need, bar maybe that first iteration of models, it'll give you obvious kind of cost and speed advantages sometimes. So this is what GPT 4.0 did for us. So you might have noticed me and Annie like GIFs as well. So there's going to be a lot of GIFs throughout this. But the first part I'm going to focus on is kind of not really AI related. It's kind of a more fundamental problem that was part of this whole system. And that's actually, how do you take documents or websites or things like that and actually get information out of them that you can then send to a model for it to do its thing. And this is quite a common problem actually. If you think about, there's CV scrapers, things like that. People scrape information off websites. You need to be able to get that information and send it to a model so it can do what it can do. And right now what our alt text solution does is it takes in PDFs. We're adding Word docs and PowerPoint soon. But what it does is it takes in those documents, parses out the text and the images that we need to generate the context, and then sends that to the model. So the way we kind of did this was we actually identified a really good Python package very early on called Fits that did it. Great results, very easy to use. But I don't know if any of you have ever used that, but just be aware that it actually has an AGPL 3.0 license, I think is what it's called, which actually means that if you use that within your software, you have to open source that software. So since we wanted to sell this as a product, it didn't really allow us to do that, so we had to scrap that idea. So we eventually identified another one, PDF Plumber, which was a wee bit difficult to learn at the start, but it did work, and it actually gives you a lot of control over the parsing. So we eventually got our kind of tool for parsing out the information from the documents, and kind of the couple of weeks and months it took us to kind of figure that out, how to do it really well and reliably, made us make the decision within analytics engines that actually we should develop our own kind of Python library which has these parsing tools for different documents and things like that, because that actually is something that is useful, and a lot of organizations are doing that, and even individuals, just because it does take a bit of time. And I think you can see the kind of challenge behind that a lot of those really good parsing tools actually require licenses or have certain sort of licenses on them that prevent you use them all the time. So still focusing on working with PDFs. It's one thing taking information out of PDFs and send that to the model or whatever. It's actually quite hard to also put information back into a PDF. They're just difficult things to work with. They look nice and clean, you can send them all around, but once you get into a PDF and actual its structure, it's quite a difficult thing to work with. There's a lot of complications in it, and before this kind of work, I hadn't heard of tagged and untagged PDFs, but this is something that haunts my nightmares now. But basically, it's one thing being able to generate alt text that's contextually aware, detailed, that's all well and good, but to actually meet these accessibility guidelines, as Annie said, you actually have to be able to put this into the documents in a way that e-readers, things like that, can actually use it and read it out. And that isn't as simple as I first thought it was anyway. And thankfully, accessibility awareness is growing a lot. It has grown a lot in the last kind of decade. So there's a lot more of tagged PDFs out there. And tagged PDFs are basically PDFs that have an underlying structure and metadata that makes it really easy to connect up different elements of the PDF and kind of how they relate to each other. And whenever we come across a PDF like this, it's great because you can actually identify where that image is, and you can put the alt text that we've generated correctly into that, and the e-reader can use it really well. But there is kind of older PDFs still around, and some PDFs that are kind of generated maybe quickly and things that aren't tagged, which are untagged PDFs, which kind of lack that structure and metadata. And whenever you come across these are difficult to kind of actually put alt text into that an e-reader can use. We did kind of hack together a solution with a Python package called Pike PDF, where essentially all we're doing is kind of putting the text directly onto the page of the document but it's invisible. So you can't see it if you look at the document, but the e-reader can see it. So it meets accessibility guidelines. But it's something we're actively working on to kind of come up with a more robust, reliable way of doing that. So that's kind of active development, but it's tricky. So working with PDFs can be hard, but I know a lot of different projects, not just AI-related projects, have to do it. So you might often hear this thing. It's just a ChatGPT wrapper about anything that comes up on the internet, Twitter, LinkedIn, or wherever. And to be honest, in our case, it is. But there's nothing wrong with that. And I think this is kind of an unfair criticism a lot of the time, kind of anytime somebody builds something or shows something off and say this is just a ChatGPT wrapper. And I think, to be honest, the reason people say this is not entirely invalid. It's basically that a lot of people, what they're building with AI at the moment, it's so quick and there's so many different use cases. People are building proofs of concept, POCs, and there's nothing wrong with that. A POC is a great way to get your technology, your idea, put it all together, see if it works. For example, we had a POC at the start of this that Annie talked through, which is essentially a ChatGPT wrapper. What it did was it allowed users a very basic front end, upload a document, parsed all the text and images, sent it to ChatGPT on Azure. We got the alt text back and we allowed them to download the document. You could argue that's a ChatGPT wrapper, but there's nothing wrong with that. The proof of concept proved to us that this was valuable. So, and this is probably the biggest lesson I learned throughout this whole process. Whenever you actually want to give this to users, get people using it, it goes far away from a ChatGPT wrapper. There's a lot more that goes into it whenever you actually kind of build this in a way that you can hand it off to people reliably. And I think the thing I really learned, which is important to keep in mind when building these kind of products or solutions with AI at its core, is that relying on those real kind of tried and tested fundamental software principles and designs and how you deploy it and all that stuff is, I would argue, way more important than whatever model you're using. Essentially, we kind of have wrapped ChatGPT there, we're sending the same information, but there's a lot more going on here. We have to handle errors, we have to build a full front end with login, different functionality, allow alt text editing. We have to have a whole database back end where this alt text is saved, different things like this. So there's a lot more that goes into it. I think don't let criticisms of it's just a ChatGPT wrapper kind of fool you. There's a lot more that goes on into these, even though it's not an overly complicated application, this alt text one. So kind of something that we learned very quickly, and perhaps some of you have put things into production, learned very quickly, is one of the first things any users, well-intentioned or not, will try to do when you give them something is break it. And that happened exactly when we gave this kind of we deployed our first version of this for internal tests, and one of our colleagues actually straight away put in a PDF with about 600 images in it, and it basically crippled our application straight away. So that kind of put us straight back to the drawing board, literally within an hour of putting it up. But basically what we did then was we kind of integrated something which a lot of you should probably integrate if you're using AI. A lot of these ChatGPT type things online use kind of conversational interfaces to communicate with AI, and that can be very good. That can be kind of natural way of discussing with something. But I think basically whenever you're doing more practical use cases like our alt text solution, queuing is your best friend. So what we did here was we kind of have a task handling queue in the back end that basically when someone uploads a document, it'll parse out the images and queue that all up in a way that is pretty seamless to the user. They'll see a progress bar, they're happy enough, they'll go away, get a cup of coffee, come back and get their alt text. But to us, what this allows us to do is kind of handle errors if they happen. We can retry documents, we can deal with rate limits on the AI model, but it also means that we can, with just one deployment, we can scale this up to a lot more users because that task handling is robust enough. It'll handle lots of users coming on at the same time. And as I say, the users don't really notice the difference. It's just a progress bar. They see it might take 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And kind of following on from this, one of the things we did was we actually implemented kind of a token-based system, and this is probably more commercial sales side of it, but essentially the way we kind of are planning on selling this alt text solution is we're going to allow users, whether they're organizations, publishers, as Annie said, universities, individual users, buy tokens off us, and the tokens will essentially give them access to generate an alt text for a certain number of images. And for us, this gives us one clear advantage. We can have one deployment, one model, and it'll be able to handle this, and we'll be able to price those tokens in whatever way makes sense commercially that we're actually making money off this. But also for users, maybe you're a one employee publisher, you might only need 100 images with alt text a year, so you can buy that amount of tokens. But also if we have a university or a large publisher, they can buy 1 million tokens. That allows us to actually scale our users from a sales point of view very well too. So there are kind of two things whenever you're actually putting AI into production. Think about queuing and think about maybe how you're going to sell it, practically sell tokens or whatever. So last thing, which is very specific to this project, but when we actually first started building this, even when Annie was doing the POC and stuff, one of the first things that kind of helped us identify this issue was that we actually had 2 customers who were interested in a solution like this who were from Spanish-speaking regions. So one of the things we had to figure out here was how do we actually make this alt text solution, a version of it, accept documents in Spanish and generate alt text in Spanish. And we tried out a couple of different things. We tried out a fine-tuned model that was fine-tuned on Spanish documents. We tried writing the prompt in Spanish, but actually whenever we went back to basics, the simplest way of doing this actually proved to be the best, which was essentially just telling the AI model, you're going to get a document in Spanish, let's generate the alt text in Spanish, but the core prompts that we used are still in English. So that actually offered a couple of different advantages for us from a development point of view, me and Annie. It allowed us to actually have a prompt that remains in English, so we can keep developing that prompt. We don't need to change too much, and it'll consistent kind of testing and stuff like that. But from a scalability point of view, it means if we want to add Irish or German or whatever, another language, we could do that in about a day. It only requires a wee bit of front-end additions and some model configuration, so very easy to scale this to different languages. But that's kind of something very specific to this project, but it was something if somebody is trying to kind of do multilingual AI, start off with the basic idea of just telling it what you want from a language point of view, and it's pretty good at it, especially with more common languages like Spanish. So let's get into some results. So this is a result from a medical document, which basically, I have 2 examples here. The one at the top is the alt text generated without context, so that's from an online alt text generator. And you can see it's pretty good. Actually, it is aware of what the image is and kind of what it's trying to tell you, but you can see below our alt text, which uses the context from around this image in the document, remember, kind of gives you a much deeper understanding, and it's an almost expert level understanding. It uses that context to explain not just what's in this image, which a lot of alt text generators do, but actually explain why it's showing you this image, what's the purpose of this image, what's it's trying to convey within this document. So this is an example kind of comparing the two, and you can see ours is really detailed, and that context adds a lot of value to it. This is 2 examples from within our actual solution. The one on the left is a mathematical graph, and it's giving you the alt text there. And as somebody with a background in maths, it's quite a good alt text actually, and that context is very important. Whenever you don't have that context, it's much less detailed, that alt text. And then on the right, you have an example of our alt text in Spanish, which you can see is quite a cartoonish image, but without that context around it, it kind of really focuses on the cartoonish aspect of that image. But whenever you add that context in, it shows you that, yeah, it's a cartoon, but it's trying to actually explain the nutritional kind of information in the document in relation to this cartoon, how that kind of is portraying that. So it's a much better alt text, the one with the context. Well, at least I've been told by the person who's fluent in Spanish in our office, but maybe it's rubbish, I don't know. But yeah, so just to finish up here, one thing I do want to focus on and leave you with is, yeah, this is a good example of finding an opportunity where AI can really help. A good example of like walking you through how you can actually build something practical that you can give to users with AI at its core. But ultimately, I think me and Annie both agree, this is a really good use case of AI. This is something where it's not for a lack of want. that humans aren't generating this alt text for documents. It just takes so long, and it's so hard to generate expert level detailed alt text for images. It can take, as Annie said, hours, days for a large corpus of documents. But for us, we can, for example, do a 10 image document in about 20 seconds. So this isn't just about getting AI to do something that humans find boring. This is actually getting AI to do something that humans aren't doing, because there's just too many documents to do. It's going to take too long. So ultimately, we're very happy with this. We're proud to stand over this, because it's opening up information learning for a lot more people than was ever possible before. And hopefully this is where we start seeing AI really change the world in the next while, is doing things that humans don't necessarily want to do, but also will just add to people's lives and help people. So we're very happy to kind of have gone through this process, learned a lot, and really happy with the outcome so far. So that's us. Thanks a million.
Do you have any questions?
Thanks very much, folks. That was a great talk. Appreciate it. When you're building a service around something like ChatGPT and sending results off to it, obviously consistency of results is going to be important here, right? How do you, if you can, guard against upstream changes in the model, for example, transforming your results in ways that you don't anticipate?
Yeah, that is actually a difficult challenge. It's one we have been contending with lately. I think kind of the way we do it, because it's hard to actually stop them changing these models at that end, is we kind of have a lot of tests in the background that before we do a deployment, we have a couple of test documents that we know we have kind of alt text we're happy with and stuff like that. So they do change the models every now and again. Their functionality doesn't change that much. That would cause uproar in a lot of businesses beyond ours. So there is slight variation sometimes, but some of these model changes, we can test them and make sure, yeah, we can still stand over them. They're pretty good. We're happy enough. So I think it's just, again, going back to the kind of fundamentals of software. It's like you need your test suite there to kind of make sure that things don't break, things don't go kind of deprecate in consistency and kind of quality and stuff like that.
Cool, thanks.
Hi. Yeah, really interesting. I was just wondering, you mentioned about this obviously comparing to some of the like AI, like online generators, let's say, that generate. I was just wondering, like, have you done testing comparing against the sort of people that would have done this work, or do you mostly leave that up to the publishers to compare to like who would have done it?
Sorry, I didn't get the end of your question.
Sorry, so like, have you compared your results to professionals that would have done this, or do the publishers do that?
Yes, so our first client was actually a publishing company, and they had internal alt text, like professional alt text generators. So the testing was, we would have our own alt text and they would have their own alt text, and we kind of did some quantitative and qualitative testing to see, you know, compare the results from our alt text and their alt text. So yeah, we didn't really leave the testing up to the wind. We had professionals to do that for us as well.
Oh, thank you.
Any more questions?
Hi, yeah, I think this is a great application that you've built, and it's really, really good. And my question is kind of around, like, if just say you put in a document and maybe like a couple of the graphs or the images, the AI maybe was like hallucinating, or maybe it wasn't exactly correct or not exactly what was expected. How can the users go about changing these ones specifically? Do they have to add in the whole document and regenerate everything, or can they do specific ones?
That's a good question. This is again back to the fundamental software stuff. Where it's not just a case of generating the alt text. Part of our front end application is this here, where you can actually edit this alt text. So the idea would be that there's always that kind of, which is something I kind of advocate a lot for in a lot of these AI use cases, is a human in the loop somewhere is good. So if you're a lecturer and you've done this for your lecture notes, you don't have to do the alt text now, so you're already saving time. So if it takes you 5 minutes to go through and just double check things and make sure nothing's too far off, that's all it takes here. And it's literally just change the text here like you would edit any text and save it, and that's all it is. And you can do that individual images. You don't need to do it for the whole document. It doesn't need to be reprocessed.
Also, just like to add the hallucination bit, we set the temperature to 0, so it's basically no hallucinations, but you could still edit the alt text as well.
No, thank you, that's great, thank you.
I really enjoyed your talk, and very good seeing people applying AI to accessibility. Have you considered applying your same sort of process to PDFs to create like easy read versions of PDFs as well as just alt text?
Yeah, when I initially met with the publishers, we kind of ran through different accessibility needs of like dynamic fonts, summarizing documents for people with dyslexia, things like that. This was the one that had the highest demand and just would create the most impact. But yeah, it's something that we're looking at, trying to make not just all text, but accessibility as a whole, like looking at different areas that we can apply AI for good, basically.
Any more? Okay, thanks very much, folks.
Thanks, Ryan.